When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, folks. We weren't planning on going live, but we are live. We have Christopher Harris joining us from San Diego, retired Border Patrol agent, 22 years in the Border Patrol, also a former law enforcement officer, corrections officer out of New York State. And he has a wealth of knowledge. He's been a contributor to Fox News, CNN, and pretty much all the networks out there on TV. Considered a subject matter expert on the border. And glad to have you here, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Mark, appreciate being here. Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we have this issue at the border, and it's kind of wild. And I purposely don't watch too much TV because it's there, it's happening, and I go about my business, living my life. But you're now busy. You're retired. You're all over the map. People want to hear your story, and you're on the circuits probably every other day or something like that?
No, not that often. I do speaking engagements. I do media. Part of it is not just because I worked 21 years on the border, or 21 plus, and 36 years law enforcement, is I was a union official for National Border Patrol Council. And I'm retired, but great bunch of guys, which also gave me a lot more insight. I was doing legislative and political affairs. I was in D.C., so I saw a lot of stuff that was going on behind the scenes and how and why. I've worked through I believe it's 4 different administrations going back to President Clinton. This is absolutely the worst I've seen it in that time frame. Mm-hmm. This is not some weird cycle. Mm-hmm. This is not from the previous administration. So I just want to backtrack.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I like to be nonpartisan. Border security,
not a problem,
and border safety should be nonpartisan. Unfortunately, it's becoming partisan. Mm-hmm. So I try not to go there. Right. But I will say in this one, this is on this administration. The crisis at the border is real, and it's on this administration.
Got it.
And I get a little tired of people saying it's not a crisis in this administration. So one group they sent down there to help out was FEMA.
FEMA.
What does the second letter stand for in that name?
Emergency.
So you're saying we have to send a group down that deals with emergencies.
Right.
It's not a crisis.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's worse than a crisis. It is an emergency. Mm-hmm. They don't send FEMA out because there's a birthday party or a ball game. They send them out in emergencies.
Right.
And what did this administration send down there? FEMA. So the administration is telling you itself that we know that there's a crisis and or emergency down there.
Right.
Just by them sending FEMA out. So it is a problem.
It is a problem. Because I know if you listen to the left, it's a humanitarian, they address it as a humanitarian issue or a humanitarian mission. So a lot of my friends are, no, it's not a crisis, it's a humanitarian. Those people need help from South and Central America. So we need to help them. But offline, we're in the lounge and you're explaining to me, if we had 2 billion people come into our country, we're going to have a catastrophe. From all the countries.
I mean, there's no doubt there's a humanitarian component to the crisis. Let's not, our humanity. I get that. Mm-hmm. And we can't handle these numbers as it is. And they're still going up. I think April was 170,000 that we apprehended.
Wow.
That's not kind of people that got away. Mm-hmm. That's who we apprehended or gave up to us.
Sure.
And we can discuss that in a minute, why people are giving up to us.
Of course.
So there is a humanitarian component. We'll never say there wasn't. Border Patrol agents going back in time when Obama was president, when the first waves came, agents would come to me as a union official. Can we bring toys in? Can we bring clothes in? And I checked with management. They said, yeah, that's fine. So the Border Patrol, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they very much know there's a humanitarian component and they want to help. But there's also a national security, a local security, and other issues that are tied into this that are equally as important. And we can't ignore them or downgrade them. We have to handle all of it as a whole package.
Right. Now you're the president of some organization that you're retired, and you help. What do you do in those roles?
No, I'm not president of anything. I'm retired from the union.
Okay.
And I'm retired as a union official, and I'm retired as a Border Patrol agent. I'm retired from law enforcement now. Totally.
Okay. Totally.
I'm involved because I want to be involved.
Awesome.
I spent 22 years of my life doing something and caring about it. And as a union guy representing the men and women of the Border Patrol, I just can't walk away from that. They deserve better than this.
Wow.
The American people deserve better.
Sure.
And I just want to get the message out. Yeah. And then people make their own decisions.
Absolutely.
But the message is not getting out, or the full message, the complete message, the truth and nothing but the truth is not getting out. Right. And that's what I see my part of this as.
Awesome. I'm glad you're here to share that. If you're in the audience and you're listening to this, feel free to hit us up and ask questions. We're also here for that too. And Chris will answer any questions you may have.
Best of my ability.
Best of his ability. And I'll be asking some questions I pre-wrote out the other night. I was watching YouTube. I love YouTube. And I love the National Geographic show covering the cartel and what's going on. And I was just fascinated. I had no idea until last week that, correct me if I mispronunciate this, but I found out the Zetas are actually special forces from Mexico military, and the cartel recruited them to pay them better to help them fight their wars. And I'm like, holy smokes.
So not all of the Zetas now, but the nucleus started as special force operators with the Mexican military that we had trained. And it was nothing nefarious. We were training them, hopefully that they would do righteous, and they got an offer they couldn't refuse.
Sure.
More money and whatnot to be enforcers for certain cartels. They've kind of started their own groups now. Very dangerous people. They're dedicated to what they do, but they're very brutal. So they're a real threat. But not just them. All the cartels are a real threat to this nation, to almost any nation state. Let's be honest. In Mexico now, they're realistically a shadow government. This whole area is they control. So if you want to get something done in an area, you might have to go through the U.S., the Mexican government, the government of Mexico, but you're probably also going to have to go through the cartel that controls that area to do whatever projects or whatever you want to do. So you're going to have permission probably from both entities. In some areas, just from the cartel. So they're almost in their own right a nation state, and that's a threat to the United States.
Absolutely. Now, in your professional opinion, is there a misinformation thing going on with the news networks right now? What's your thoughts on all that on the border?
Absolutely. And again, that's why, last year I wasn't doing anything because of COVID-19, but I didn't have to speak out anyway, because the border was actually the best it's probably ever been for a number of reasons.
Sure.
And so there's two things I think that are coming out from the news sources that are normally considered mainstream media that are not truthful or not 100% true, and also coming from the administration. One is the Secretary of Homeland Security, who I used to work for, Border Patrol is a component of that, said the border is shut down. It's simply not true. Simply not true. The numbers are skyrocketing. They're spiking. It is absolutely not true. It's demonstrably not true. And either he knows that and he's being untruthful to the American people, or if he doesn't know that, then he shouldn't be in that job.
Right.
So there's one thing there. The border is not secure. The border is not closed. Not at all. The second thing is they were using an interesting metric the other day. I saw this administration and the mainstream media was kind of gobbling it up, was that, because there's so many less children, UACs, unaccompanied children, and that goes up to the age of 17, by the way, who are in Border Patrol custody. Well, that's good because we shouldn't be holding kids for any length of time. But the fact is they're still in U.S. government custody. They just happen to be with HHS now. And we have them on military bases. We have them at the San Diego Convention Center. They're stashed all over the place. They don't know what to do with them. There's almost 30,000. So 26,000 change last I heard. So they don't know what to do with them. They can't find their parents. Not all the time are their parents already here or family members. And they're talking about giving them to sponsors. And that in itself is a little terrifying because we're not doing the DNA testing on all these people to find out that family member is actually a family member. Right. And I don't even know what sponsor. I say this kidding around, but it should be horrifying anybody. So somebody walks in, he's 26 years old, a single male, and he says, just ignore the MS-13 tat I have on, but I like to sponsor 2 13-year-old girls. And I'm not saying that's how it's going to work, but I'm just saying we really got to start asking questions. What are we going to do with these minors? And where are we going to put them? So to say that the metric is, well, they're not in Border Patrol custody, so we're good, it is just disingenuous at best and lying to the American people at worst.
Like you're saying, you just brought up a good point. Like what's going to happen, like these schools are going to be filled with these guys that claim they're 18 and they're really 24 going to high school, and they're going to start preying on these.
Well, that was the point I wanted to bring up to the American public is, and I like to tell stories that involve me, not because like, hey, look at me, but I know the truth.
The truth.
I know, somebody can't say, oh, you heard that from somebody. No, I lived it.
Exactly.
I was doing a media tour a few years ago with several members of the media union tour on the border.
Right.
And we were getting our first waves of people abusing the asylum system. And I hope to talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
But the press, I said, they're not trying to evade apprehension. They'll cross the border somewhere and just sit there and wait for us. And a couple of the press laughing, oh, come on. I'm like, there's a group of 11 right now. Let's go talk to them. They're sitting right there. Right. So I got on my radio, called, on duty Border Patrol agents to come down. But I got out, and in Spanish, I was talking to this group of 11. And one of them had a full beard. And I said, how old are you? And he said, 24. And a couple of the members of the press spoke Spanish, and they laughed. And they said, you're not going to believe him, are you? I said, I have to. He has no ID. So he says he's 14, which is what he's. I'm sorry. He looked about 24. He said, how old are you? He said, I'm 14. Okay. And they're like, you're not going to believe that, are you? Like, yeah, I have to. When we process them, we're going to have to go with that because we don't have ID to disabuse that statement.
Right.
So what you're going to see is people that 17 is a lot of people don't consider a child or a kid, but we go up to 17 legally. But if you're 21, 22, 23 and claim you're younger, we're going to have to treat you as an unaccompanied child. And so these people are ultimately going to be in school with your kids. And I told you this story earlier. Is one of the last major cases I worked on as a cop in New York, north of New York City, was, and I believe the kid was from, and I say kid, air quotes, was from Guatemala. And I believe he was a foster child for some social worker. Well, they told the school he was 16, but because he was so far behind, and he didn't even really speak Spanish, he spoke some indigenous mountain language, they had put him in 9th grade. So he befriends a 12-year-old who's in the same school. I think it was like a junior high or whatever it was. And then when the 12-year-old doesn't want to play the sexual games that the alleged 16-year-old wanted to play, he strangled him and killed him.
Right.
So we figured out who it was. Interviewing him was problematic. I think I mentioned my friend, my partner was from Spain, the police officer, and he came out, was frustrated because he spoke Castilian Spanish. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is when we finally finished our investigations, turns out the kid was 24 years of age. They had lied and said he was 16. And then even then put him in a lower grade, 9th grade. Mm-hmm. So this is a very real thing. I saw firsthand in my life. So you're going to have people in your children, your sons and your daughters' classrooms, and they might be in 7th grade, but this person is really 18 or 19. Mm-hmm. And we saw the problems of MS-13 where they recruit, and then horrible things happen in the schools. So these young men and women that we have in our custody now, we have to put them somewhere. They're going to have to go to schools, and we're not going to know how old they are. We're not going to know their background. And that's a lot of them, through no fault of their own. Sure. But a lot of them have grown up with violence, and they're quite prepared to use violence because that's what they grew up with.
Good point.
So, I mean, they've carried guns, they've done this, they've done that. So that's a real problem that the American people are going to have to confront, that thousands and thousands of these minors are going to be dumped into these schools, and you're not going to know that.
So, Chris, how far away are we from a immigration epidemic nationwide as far as having those issues in high schools? I would guess in my mind, from my law enforcement criminology background, I'm thinking what we're seeing on the streets of America right now as far as gang warfare is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, it's going to increase exponentially. And the fact is the numbers are not slowing down. Recently, I think the U.S. Border Patrol apprehended people from 160 nations from around the world. And understand this, they're not using most of them the immigration system. That's one system. What they're doing is the asylum system. They're gaming it. Okay. And we saw this before. And I don't care if you like Donald Trump or not. Truly don't.
Sure.
I don't think I want my daughter dating him. Okay.
There you go.
But the bottom line is, pull up your big boy pants.
Yeah.
Use your critical thinking skills.
Right.
And judge him on his actions. And so what my wheelhouse is border security.
Right.
And his actions were phenomenal. And one of the things the National Border Patrol Council did, and we endorsed him.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we did was because he says, I'm going to listen to you guys as subject matter experts on how to secure the border. Not some Harvard professor, not some La Raza attorney, you guys, because you do this day in, day out. And he did listen to us. And one of the things he was told over and over again is we need to do something about the asylum system where they're gaming it. Now, understand this, everything that comes across the Southwest border that's illicit or illegal is through the cartels. Either they outright own and control, or at least you have to answer to them. That's illicit money, that's narcotics, that's people, that's weapons. Anything that's illegal across that Southwest border is through the cartel. So what we said was that the cartels, the smuggling organizations, transnational criminal organizations, they have scripts for different parts of the world. And so the people are given these scripts of what to say when they come into our custody. And basically they're trying to game the asylum system. So if you're coming from El Salvador, you're going to say it's MS-13 is coming after me. We had people from Nepal claiming that they're Maoist insurrection. I remember getting into it with the guy going, that was crushed a few years ago, dude. Find something new.
Right.
So they'll lie. They'll say this is why, because they don't want to use the immigration system. So they want to use the asylum system. And what was happening was that we can't adjudicate their cases. We would then give them paperwork. We called it walking around paperwork. They'd be released on their own recognizance and sent off to the United States to wait for some nebulous date 3, 4, 5 years down the road to have a hearing, asylum hearing with an asylum hearing officer. The problem with that was the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, several years ago did a study and showed between 80 and 90%, close to 90%, will not show up for their hearings. Now, the 10% that do, the vast majority of them do get asylum, but there's a reason. If you know you have a real case, you're going to show up.
Right.
The others don't show up, and we'll never see them again. We see ICE being hobbled. Nobody's ever going to go looking for them. So what President Trump did was he made an agreement with Mexico, with President Lopez Obrador, who's a socialist guy. I mean, he's a socialist president.
Okay.
They made the migrant protection protocols.
Okay.
And what that said is, you're saying that you're leaving this particular country for this particular reason, that you're claiming credible fear. I want asylum.
Right.
Well, you're in Mexico now. You're safe. So you're going to wait, because the American people believe in fairness. So you're not going to jump the line. You're going to wait in an orderly manner by the time you signed up. And we will, when we have a next hearing date available, we will call you in to have your hearing. And if you pass that, if you reach that bar, which is encoded in law, you're going to be allowed to stay in the U.S. under asylum. Welcome to America. And that's a great thing.
Sure.
But if you don't reach that bar, or we believe you're lying, you're going to be disallowed. And so that was working. President Lopez Obrador liked it because it kept all these people from flooding into his own country.
Sure.
Well, one of the first things this administration did was undo that.
Oh, wow.
And even Lopez Obrador has since said, I'd like to have that back. That's not a good thing that you did to undo that. And so when I talk to my liberal friends, I'm like, that's a socialist guy. You should maybe listen to him when he's saying this was a good thing.
Really?
And so we're back now to being flooded by people claiming asylum, and we're releasing them into the United States, and we will never see them again. So they're gaming the system. And I will give you an example if you don't mind.
Please do.
Again, I was interviewing a guy several years ago from El Salvador, and he was claiming credible fear. And I said, so what's your fear? And he said, MS-13 was coming after me. I said, okay, so when you got to Mexico, why didn't you just stop there? Oh, they would have followed me. I said, but you told me earlier in the interview you're a dirt poor farmer. You're that important, MS-13. Wow, they'd follow me. I'm like, okay, so where are you going in the U.S.? L.A. And I started laughing, and I said, dude, come on. That's where MS-13 started. Exactly. That's one of its most power centers. That's where you're going to get away from MS-13 is L.A.
Click. Light bulb.
And then I had another guy who was from Guatemala, and he said it was gangs that he was leaving. And I said, where are you going? He said, Oakland. And I laughed again. I said, I think people from Oakland are leaving Oakland, going to Guatemala to get away from the gangs in Oakland.
Right.
So some of this stuff is just, it's not true. And even if it is, it doesn't fit the bar, the legal definition of asylum. President Biden has said, oh, well, they're leaving because of hurricanes and this and that. None of that fits asylum. Oh. If you want to redo immigration for that, okay. And there's refugee status with something different, but that's not asylum. And we have to decide, are we a nation of laws? Or just, I changed my mind, I don't like that law, so we're going to kind of fine tune it because I say we should. That's not how this country is founded. And that's everything through our democratic republic is it's a nation of laws. And if we're not, we're in real serious trouble.
Great points for the audience. And just for the audience, so you guys know, this is Christopher Harris. He worked on the border law enforcement for 23 plus years. Was law enforcement in New York and corrections and detective. He's done it all. And also a sought after subject matter expert on the border with Fox News, CNN, and all the major news networks out there. And it's a pleasure to have him here at the studio with us at Growth Mindset. And he's a busy guy. So we're just discussing the border issue. Some people believe it's an immigration issue, and other people think it's a crisis. But we got the man himself is telling exactly what it is. And we're not getting the misinformation. We're getting uncensored information from Chris Harris. Anyway, so here's a question a friend of mine wanted me to ask you. In your opinion, what is the whole thing on the border policy? What's going on there with the whole border policy from the Biden administration? What's their point? So
within days of this administration being sworn in, they undid several of the previous administration's executive orders and policies, and then did some of their own. Yeah. And so you had those two things going on, undoing prior policies, doing their own, and then the optics, the things they've said leading up to the election, and then they continue to say. What it has is just, it's told the world that the border is open. They can now say it's closed, but by their actions, it's not. Again, one of the first things was to undo that migrant protection protocol, which was fantastic. It really kept them from gaming the asylum system. The other was Title 42, which is a health thing, and with the pandemic, they lessened that.
Yeah.
And you when this first started, they were still screaming the pandemic was fully on, and lockdown, but yet you're letting all these people in that were not COVID-19 testing.
Right.
We don't do that. And some of the NGOs and non-government organizations, when we turned them over to them, did their own. They found between 10 and 12% had COVID-19. We were releasing them into this country. I know the station I used to work on, Imperial Beach Border Patrol Station, driving people to the bus and trolley stops, dropping them off. And then they're getting on and they're getting on planes too.
Right.
And so they're going everywhere in this country. And some of them have COVID-19. So Title 42, it's how it was being applied was changed. And then you stop building the infrastructure, the fencing. And I have some real problems with that. Besides that, the infrastructure is very important. It's one of the components. It's not a silver bullet, but it's one of the key components to securing the border. Technology and boots on the ground are the other part of the triangle, the triad. But what you did was to me was reprehensible. We're the United States government. We had contracts with people, and we basically just ripped those contracts up.
Right.
These are people that employed people that they had already bought supplies, and were said, "Stop, cease right now." If you don't think there's penalty clauses,
of course,
and that we're going to be paying that out. But plus, it's just how reprehensible. Because a contract is a legally binding document, and the U.S. government just said, we don't have to be bound by it. What does that say about the U.S. government or the administration that does that? So if they really were against the infrastructure, what they should have done, in my opinion, was say the money that's already been appropriated and the contract signed, we're going to let them play out. We're just not going to redo any of it.
Right.
That would have been fine. I mean, I would prefer them to finish all the infrastructure they promised us, but at least what you paid for and contracted for, and these people, I have another year's work for my employees. You should have let that play out.
Right.
Plus, we have equipment and supplies, the concrete and metal rebar that's just sitting around there now.
Right.
Either being stolen from Mexico, they'll come across and take it back, or it's just going to basically rot and rust away. What a waste of the American taxpayer. And that infrastructure is helpful. And anybody that thinks it's not has never worked on the border. But secondly, what happened after January 6th in D.C.? They threw up fences everywhere, razor wire and fences. They're still up. Why? Because they work. They work. Fort Knox is guarded by fences, razor wire, technology, and armed mint police.
Right.
So people that are rich have the same thing. They have fences or walls. They have technology, sensors, and cameras, and they have armed security. Those three things together work.
Right.
But to say that fences don't work is ludicrous.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it helps also keep the men and women of the Border Patrol safer. It's much harder for a guy to climb a 30-foot fence and throw a rock on your head. Because I got hit in the head by a rock right up against the old fence, 8 foot high, an asthmatic 12-year-old could climb it. And I was on and out of work for 4 years with traumatic brain injury.
Holy cow.
That wouldn't have happened if it was a 18-foot or 30-foot high wall. And it helps us do our job better. It slows them down. Nothing's infallible. But we don't do things because it's infallible. We don't say, well, we've not stopped all murders. Let's make it legal. We don't do that. So those things were what this administration undid or did on their own. And releasing the asylum seekers back into the United States is probably the worst of it all. And so people ask me, what are the solutions set? Go back to the migrant protection policy. Right. President Lopez Obrador says, I want to go back to that. I don't know if it's possible now to finish the infrastructure, but at least start enforcing Title 42 to the fullest and the migration protection protocols. And you'll see a drastic reduction of what the surge on the border. And let me tell you this. Yeah. The men and women of Border Patrol, in most federal law enforcement, not all, but most, the mandatory retirement age is 57. A lot of our guys are prior military. They've served their country in the Marines and Navy, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard. So they want to serve. They want to protect this country. The morale is so shot that they're retiring as soon as they can. It used to be guys would come up to us, men and women would come up to us when they were hitting 57 and wanted the union to try to help them get waivers to stay longer. Wow. Now they're all bailing at 50, 51, 52, because what in effect the Border Patrol has become now is the northern arm of the cartels, of the smuggling organization. Wow. So what they used to have to do is pay people to be the load drivers and operate the load houses. We're doing that for them now. The Border Patrol is doing that for that now. We're transporting them from the border to the station, cleaning them up, giving them food, and then transporting them to the bus or trolleys or wherever. That's the Border Patrol doing it. Right. And so the men and women of the U.S. Border Patrol, that's not what I signed on for. I signed on to help protect this nation, the people in it, and the Constitution. That's not it. So people are bailing more than ever, and the morale is shot because not what they want to do to serve their country.
And folks, this is Christopher Harris explaining what's happening at the border. the morale, the welfare, the mental state of our Border Patrol agents protecting our country's border. And Christopher Harris has been on several news networks, NBC, CNN, Fox, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and he's just given us his opinion on what's happening down there. And we're going to wrap up this segment and take a break, and we'll be right back. And thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, we'll be back in a few minutes to go live again.